They told you it was the most reliable motorcycle on the planet. They told you it's a buy it and forget it machine. But what they didn't tell you is that in 2026, a simple $40 air filter change can cost you $800 in labor and 6 hours of your life. Is this legendary reliability actually a financial trap? Today, we're stripping it down to the frame to show you the bills the dealership hopes you never calculate. The Honda Goldwing GL 1800 sits at $25,500 for the base manual and $30,500 for the Tour with the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. Those numbers sound reasonable for what you get. A 1,833cc flat 6, 125 horsepower, 125 pound-feet of torque, double wishbone front suspension, Apple CarPlay, heated seats, and a sound system that embarrasses most living rooms. On paper, it's flawless engineering. In the service bay, it's a different conversation entirely. And here's the loop you need to keep in the back of your mind for the next 15 minutes. The bike is genuinely well built. Nobody is disputing that. But there's a specific type of rider, and you probably know him, who bought the Wing believing the reputation was the whole story. He's now sitting on a $2,000 annual maintenance bill he never saw coming. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how that bill gets built, line by line, and whether the math works for your situation. But the number that's going to bother you most isn't the air filter. We'll get there. The bulletproof tax. Let's start with the philosophy, because this is where the confusion begins. Honda built the GL 1800 to last. Not 40,000 miles, not 100,000 miles. The engineering target on this platform has always been 200,000 miles, and there are documented Wings with that kind of mileage still on the road today, confirming the engine itself is as close to bulletproof as a gasoline power plant gets. That reputation is real. It's earned. So why are we talking about a financial trap? Because building something to last 200,000 miles requires components, tolerances, materials, systems that are almost impossible for the average owner to access physically. The complexity isn't incidental. It's the consequence of the engineering. And the more complex the system, the more specialized the service it demands. That's the tax, not a design flaw. A design philosophy that comes with a service bill most dealers are not going to volunteer up front. Take the DCT, the dual-clutch transmission that makes the Tour DCT the most technically sophisticated touring motorcycle on the American market in 2026. 2 wet clutch packs, 7 forward speeds, electronic shift logic, mapped to 4 ride modes. It is genuinely remarkable technology. Have you ever stopped to ask what that technology requires when something needs adjustment, when the fluid needs attention, when the shift calibration drifts, and the bike starts hunting gears on the highway? Here's the answer. It requires Honda-specific tooling and diagnostic software that most independent shops simply don't have. What that means practically is that your service options are narrowed before you've ridden a single mile. You're tethered to the dealer network from the moment you sign the paperwork. The DCT fluid service, separate from the engine oil, runs dealer quotes in the $275 to $300 range for a combined oil and filter change, depending on your market. That's not outrageous for one service event on a premium touring bike. But when you understand that the DCT has its own filter, its own fluid spec, and its own service intervals that run independently of the engine oil schedule, you start to see how the calendar fills up. And here's the part that should give you pause. A standard OBD scanner won't talk to the Goldwing's electronics the way you need it to. If you're used to plugging in a generic scam tool and clearing codes yourself, that workflow is over. The Wing speaks a dialect that requires Honda's HDS, the Honda Diagnostic System, or a compatible professional tool, which means any shop that doesn't have it can't fully service this bike. That's not a rumor from a forum. That's the architecture of the system, the plastic fortress. But the thing that's going to cost you the most money, the thing that separates the Goldwing ownership experience from every other touring bike on the market, isn't the electronics, it's the plastic. Before we get to the most expensive number in today's video, and there's a figure coming up that is going to fundamentally change how you think about what this bike actually costs per mile, you need to understand the access problem. The 2026 GL 1800 weighs 845 pounds in DCT Tour trim. Most of that mass is accounted for. The engine, the frame, the shaft drive, the full fairing system with integrated luggage. That fairing system is an engineering achievement. Wind management on this platform is genuinely world-class. But every panel, every cowl, every cleverly integrated piece of bodywork sits between you and every serviceable component on the bike. The air filter sits behind layers of fairing that require systematic disassembly to access. Not one panel, not two panels, a complete disrobing sequence involving the front upper cowl, the inner cowl, multiple side panels, and anywhere from 20 to 30 push-pin clips and fasteners depending on configuration. Those push-pin clips matter more than they sound. They're made to be removed. Once, twice, maybe 5 times. After a decade of cycling, after a decade of thermal expansion and contraction, after the first time someone who doesn't know the wing rushes the job, those clips start to break. And genuine Honda clips run $3 to $5 a piece in the US market. That sounds trivial until you've snapped 4 of them during a rushed air filter service and you're standing in the garage trying to figure out why your left lower fairing has a rattle that wasn't there before. This is real-world ownership. Now let's talk about that air filter number, because it's the one that exposes the whole system. The Goldwing air filter itself costs around $40 from Honda, completely reasonable. The labor to access it at a dealership is a different story. Owner reports from multiple US markets consistently document labor quotes in the $250 to $500 plus range for this single task, with some premium market dealers quoting over that threshold. How? Honda's own warranty flat rate for the air filter job on the GL 1800 runs under 1 hour, and dealers routinely apply a multiplier. Add in the billable shop rate, which in major US metro areas in 2026 is running $125 to $150 per hour at franchise dealerships. And the arithmetic is straightforward. You're paying someone to remove your bike, not to do anything particularly skilled. What's the honest comparison here? On a Harley-Davidson Road Glide, the air filter is under the tank cover and takes 20 minutes with basic tools. On a BMW R1250 GS, the filter is accessible without removing significant bodywork. The Goldwing asks more of you for the same fundamental task. That's not an opinion. It's an access problem that affects every service interval you'll ever encounter on this bike. And if you're the kind of rider who does your own wrenching, which describes most of the people watching this, the first time you do the air filter job yourself will take you 3 to 4 hours. Experienced wing mechanics get it down to under 2. But the first time, plan your afternoon. The software paywall. Here's the question nobody at the dealership wants you to ask directly. What happens when the software needs updating? The 2026 Goldwing Tour runs an integrated electronics platform that manages the electronically adjustable rear suspension, the 7-inch TFT navigation display, the Honda smartphone voice control system, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and the throttle-by-wire system that feeds the 4 ride modes. All of that is software managed, and software needs updating. Firmware revisions happen, calibrations drift, and the dealer is the only entity in the authorized chain that can push those updates. What does that mean for the rider in a rural market, 300 miles from the nearest Honda dealer with a technician certified on the GL 1800 platform? It means a service trip becomes a day trip. It means a routine software update turns into a logistical event. And it means that the independence you expect from owning a machine, the freedom to maintain it on your terms on your schedule, is partially governed by Honda's dealer network, not by your own skill with a wrench. The electronics on this bike are genuinely excellent. They work. But excellent electronics that you can't service yourself are a dependency, not a feature. The DCT shift logic, specifically, requires recalibration under certain conditions, clutch wear patterns, fluid viscosity changes at temperature extremes, and that recalibration requires dealer-level tooling. A generic code reader will show you fault codes. It will not perform the adaptive calibration procedure. This is the same architecture challenge that has quietly transformed the independent motorcycle shop from a service alternative to a backup option for wing owners who don't want to deal with the dealer. Some markets have independent specialists who've invested in Honda HDS tooling. Most don't, which means, practically speaking, you need to locate your nearest competent Honda dealer before you buy this bike, not after. That's not fear-mongering, that's logistics. Section Wear and Tear versus Reality. Now we get to the part that even committed wing owners tend to underestimate: the consumables. And this is where the weight of the Goldwing, that 845 to 856 pounds of touring excellence, becomes a line item on your annual budget. Physics doesn't care about Honda's reputation. A machine that heavy, running at touring speeds with 2 uploads, consumes rubber at a rate that the spec sheet doesn't prepare you for. The rear tire on the 2026 GL 1800 is a 255/16. That's a specialty size, not a size you walk into any tire shop and find on the shelf. The Bridgestone Exedra, the OEM fitment, runs in the $200 to $250 range for the rear alone, before mounting. And the Goldwing rear tire, under spirited 2-up touring, is documented by owners in the 12,000 to 15,000 mile replacement window. Not 20,000, not 25. 12 to 15,000 miles is a realistic expectation under real-world conditions. Do that math on an annual riding season of 8 to 10,000 miles, and you're budgeting for a rear tire every riding season or season and a half. At duo rates, labor plus mounting plus balancing on a bike that requires significant wheel removal effort due to the fairing, a rear tire swap can reach $400 all in at a franchise dealer. The front braking system is extraordinary. Dual 6-piston Nissan calipers on 320mm discs. Electronically controlled combined ABS. It will stop 850 pounds of motorcycle with a precision that is genuinely impressive. But those 6-piston calipers, those compound-specific pads engineered for that rotor size on that mass, when they wear, they're not generic parts. Brake pad sets for the GL 1800 front system run $50 to $80 per axle at OEM pricing. The labor to service them, given the fairing access required on this platform, adds to the clock. These are not cost-prohibitive numbers in isolation, but you're not looking at these numbers in isolation. The shaft drive. This is the part of the Goldwing story that is genuinely underappreciated as a long-term cost saver. It eliminates chain adjustments, sprocket wear, chain replacement cycles that, on a chain drive touring bike, run into hundreds of dollars over time. The shaft on the GL 1800 is robust and well-engineered, but it requires final drive gear oil changes every 10,000 miles. Neglect that interval, and it gets neglected, especially by owners who buy used and don't have a documented service history, and the final drive unit becomes a catastrophic failure waiting for a trigger. A final drive rebuild on the Goldwing is not a quick job and not a cheap job. Preventive maintenance on this system is genuinely cost-effective, but preventive is the operative word, and it only works if the previous owner actually did it. And then there's the recall history, because if you're considering a 2018, 2019, 2020, or 2021 GL 1800, the 6th generation models that defined the current platform, you need to know about 2 separate documented safety campaigns. The first affected 2018 through 2020 models and involved fuel pump impellers that could deform, causing fuel pump failure and potential engine stall. Dealers replaced the fuel pump module at no charge. The second, more serious campaign affected 18,196 units, spanning 2018 through 2021 GL 1800 motorcycles. In those bikes, the primary drive gear bolt on the crankshaft can break, and when it does, the result is an engine stall that locks the rear wheel. Honda documented at least 1 rider injury and multiple field reports before the remedy was issued. Dealers replaced the primary drive gear bolt at no cost. Both of these are covered under Honda's free recall service, and if you're shopping used, you need to verify VIN status on both before you buy. The verdict. So let's put the honest number on it. If you buy a 2026 Honda Goldwing Tour DCT at $30,500 plus destination, you are not buying a low-maintenance machine. You are buying the highest quality, most technically sophisticated touring motorcycle currently sold in the American market. And you are accepting that the sophistication has a service cost that is proportional to its complexity. That's a knowable, manageable cost, but it requires going in with open eyes. A realistic annual maintenance budget for a Goldwing Tour DCT under normal touring use, combining oil service, DCT fluid changes, final drive service at correct intervals, brake service, and a rear tire every season to season and a half, runs in the range of $1,200 to $2,000 per year, depending on your market's labor rates and whether you're doing any of the work yourself. That number assumes nothing goes wrong. No suspension adjustments, no electronic calibrations, no fairing damage from a parking lot tip over, Just scheduled maintenance on a bike ridden 8 to 10,000 miles annually. Is that expensive? Compared to a Harley-Davidson road glide with a Milwaukee 8117 and a belt drive, yes, meaningfully so. Compared to the operating cost of a BMW K1600 GTL, roughly comparable. Compared to what you'd spend owning a truck as your touring vehicle, not even close. Who's the Goldwing for then? It's for the rider who values comfort, technology, and long-haul capability above mechanical simplicity. The rider who doesn't mind being anchored to a dealer network, or who has invested the time to locate the right independent shop with proper tooling. The rider who understands that 125 horsepower through a 7-speed DCT with ride modes, electronically controlled suspension, and heated everything isn't going to service itself the way a carburetor-era cruiser does. If you can own this bike with honest expectations, it will deliver on every promise Honda has ever made about it. The engine is that good. The platform is that capable. The problem was the gap between the reputation and the reality. And that gap is where dealers make money, where service advisors count on you not doing the math before you sign the finance contract, and where otherwise intelligent riders end up surprised by costs that were entirely predictable from the first day of ownership. None of what we've covered today is hidden information. It's all in the service manual, in forum threads, in the documented recall databases. The dealer just isn't going to volunteer it during the test ride. So here's the real question to close on, and it's one the industry doesn't want you asking out loud. As motorcycles get more technologically complex, as DCT systems and ride-by-wire and electronically controlled suspension become the standard rather than the exception across every premium touring platform, are we moving toward a future where true independent motorcycle ownership, where you can maintain and repair your own machine without dealer-level tooling and software access, is simply no longer available at the top end of the market? The Goldwing is the current frontier of that question. Drop your answer in the comments, because the next generation of this argument is already being built in Honda's engineering labs, and it's worth having the conversation before the choice disappears entirely.